joining us in another episode to Introduction to Spiritism. Today we'll be covering chapters 15 and 16, which talks about reincarnation. Now, reincarnation is misunderstood because people believe that reincarnation is the process by which an animal spirit can enter a human body. Now, that's an interesting idea, but in reality, according to the Spiritist philosophy, it's not possible, or that a human spirit can actually enter into a human body, a theory called metempsychosis. Now, that would be actually considered regression, moving backwards. And we Spiritists, we believe in the evolution, but evolution can only happen forward and not backwards. Either we can remain stationary at one place in our evolutionary point, or we can move forward. Metempsychosis will be a process by which, if a human spirit can enter in an animal body, the spirit will be moving backwards in its evolution, which is not possible. Reincarnation is also misunderstood with the theory of resurrection, the idea that a dead body can be brought back to life. Now, that's not possible either. The individuals who believe in resurrection, it's because Christ resurrected Lazarus and also the daughter of Jairus. That's because back in those days, they didn't know a state of the human body called lethargy or catalepsy, in which the person actually has the appearance of being dead. Now, Christ knew this with his intellectual and moral superiority. Therefore, he actually ordered Lazarus to reassume the movements of his body. But he did not resurrect Lazarus. He did not bring Lazarus from the dead because he was not yet dead. There's a rule of biology that states that all organic matter must go through a process of decomposition. It's interesting to know that when someone is pregnant, a woman's womb, it's actually composing a new body, meaning it's putting pieces together, atom and molecules. It's a process of composition. The prefix "con" means with, so it's putting with positions together. But when someone dies, an individual now will go through a process of decomposition, removing from specific positions. So atoms and molecules will now be consumed by earth. And if there is a tree nearby, that tree root will actually absorb those same atoms and molecules that one day compose someone else's body and will make a fruit with it. So whenever you eat a fruit, a vegetable, you are actually ingesting molecules and atoms that used to compose other people's body. So we don't resurrect in the flesh. We do resurrect by coming back to a new experience. And that's what reincarnation stands for. You are coming back into a new body. You are resurrecting in that sense, but not that your body, your old body, has brought back from the dead. What is reincarnation? The prefix "re" means, again, to do something over. The suffix "shan" means an action. And the root of the word reincarnation is actually "carne," which means flesh. So reincarnation is the action of re-entering the flesh. So what's the purpose of reincarnation? Well, there are a couple of purposes for us to re-enter the flesh as many times as needed. One of them is for us to be instruments of life. By reincarnating, we are fulfilling our role, if we might say, in the biggest concert of all, the concert of life, fulfilling the role of a mother, of a father, a son, a daughter. And with that, we are helping the supreme intelligence of the universe, the concert of life. Another reason that we reincarnate is to gain experience, trials. You see, all of us are born simple and ignorant. In other words, we are not complex in regards to the way we appear, and we also lacking in knowledge. So we reincarnate to gain complexity in our manifestation, in our physical appearance, but also to gain knowledge of everything. Another reason that we reincarnate is to atone for our mistakes. A process called expiation, in which we actually get the chance to fix our mistakes. Reincarnation should not be looked at it as if it's a punishment of some kind, because it's not. It's always an opportunity for us to grow, for us to keep evolving, because evolution occurs for everything, including for the human soul. Where do we reincarnate? Well, we reincarnate where we will find the material that we need, the conditions that we must have to develop our intellect and our morality. If you ask, where should a 5-year-old be enrolled at? Is it college? Is it high school? Absolutely not. A 5-year-old must be enrolled in kindergarten. That's because that place will offer that child the conditions that he needs, the environment that he must have, that it's according to his intellectual capability. Where do a 14-year-old enrolled at? Well, in a high school. Therefore, we as spirits, we reincarnate into planets that better serve our intellectual and moral needs. We have been on this planet many times in the past, but this is not the only planet we have been reborn. And this will not be the only planet that we will reborn, because planets around the universe, they are different schools for the ascendancy of the soul. As a result, we go to wherever we need. And sometimes there are individuals that actually reincarnate in less advanced worlds. And in these worlds, they become missionaries of some kind, intellectual missionaries or moral missionaries. Another question that begets when we study this topic is, how many times do we reincarnate? Well, there is no set number to reincarnation. You will reincarnate as many times as you need to fulfill your mission. It's interesting that people use this word all the time. I believe I have a mission. That's true. We all have a mission. And what's our mission? Our mission is to develop ourselves intellectually and morally. In other words, to become very smart and at the same time, very kind. Therefore, how long is going to take us to develop our intellectuality and our morality? Well, that depends on each individual's effort. There is no set number. However, just like any other school, because that's what planet Earth is, nothing but a school. Just like any other school, if there are people who are staying behind, not only they're staying behind, but they're also causing lots of disharmony and influencing other children, other students in a very negative way, the best thing for the school to do is actually to place those students who are lacking in advancement in a school that is more in accordance to their moral and intellectual needs. And the same thing might happen to us as well. We don't have a set number to evolve, but if we lack in advancement, if we lack the effort, if we are lazy intellectually and morally, we are invited to go into a less evolved world, less evolved school. Now, what happens when we are in between reincarnations? What are we doing? Well, we are in a spiritual plane. Where is the spiritual plane? The spiritual plane is actually everywhere. The material plane is in the spiritual plane. So when we are in the spiritual plane, one can be analyzing what we have done in our past reincarnation, the things that we have achieved, and also what we are lacking. We analyze the people that we have harmed. We also try to learn from our mistakes. So in the spiritual lane between reincarnations, we are studying the downfall of our personality, the things that have caused our pain, and the things that we have done that caused other people's pain. And after a careful analysis, by the help of people who are highly evolved, more highly evolved than us, they guide us. They help us choose our future reincarnation based on our spiritual needs. So if you're listening to the topic of reincarnation for the first time, it sounds very surprising that someone would actually choose a difficult reincarnation for themselves. But that's what occurs most of the time. When we are aware of our destiny, what we're supposed to do with ourselves, we choose the trials that will help us advance. And this is why in the spiritual plane, after analyzing what we have done and the way we have used our free will, we have the courage, we actually beg for difficult trials, trials that will help us to clean up our past and make us move forward. Just like a college student, when a college student is entering college and he or she's registering for classes, they're picking up the classes that will give them the environmental conditions, the intellectual challenges that they need in order to acquire the degree that they're aiming for. If they pick only easy classes, classes that will not help them at all, how can they ever achieve their dream and get their degree? So they choose those classes according to their educational needs, their professional aspirations. So in the spiritual plane, we do exactly the same. We choose the trials and experiences and sometimes the expiation process that would help us to advance spiritually. This is the reason we are born into difficult families. We are born into difficult environments. We're born into conditions that once we're there, they don't appear to be pleasing, but they are the most helpful in order to help us to advance morally and intellectually. Now, what are the philosophical arguments for reincarnation? There are individuals who believe that with a single physical existence, your entire future is set. If you have done everything according to what they consider is right, you will go to heaven forever, eternity. It's not 100,000 years, not a million years, but eternity. Do we even know what that is? And if that individual has not fulfilled their obligations with what these individuals consider to be a right path, that person, when they die, will go to hell. And for how long? Is it 6 months? Is it 100,000 years? No, it's for eternity. Once again, do we even know what that is? It's a very long time for someone to suffer or for someone to join happiness if they have lived for 90 years. How can the entire future be set with such a fraction of time? So this concept that we have one physical existence and our future is set after death is actually against what we think are the attributes of God. For example, people say from all different religions that God is all-knowing. Now, what it means to be all-knowing? All-knowing means that you know everything. You know the past, the present, and the future. Now, if God knows the future, and according to most religions, God knows the future, if someone live their lives in such way that by the time they die, they will deserve hell. God knew beforehand that that person will live such wrongfully life. And the question is, why God allowed to do it? People would say, well, because we have free will. Well, no one is questioning the existence of free will. We definitely have free will. And just to clarify matters, what is free will? Our ability to choose from A, B, C, D, different choices. So for example, if you take your child to the ice cream store, you know before your child picks the flavor, which flavor that would be. If there are chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry, by you knowing your child, you know your child will go for strawberry. Now, that multiplied by the infinite, it's what God is. Someone or something that we don't know what God is the supreme intelligence of the universe, knows to the infinite our choices, the things that we'll pick for ourselves. So if someone will choose a wrongful life to live, would make all these mistakes, that person will go to hell. Now, some people would say, well, but before that person actually dies, they repent of their sins. Now, I'm telling you, that's not the case. This particular example, this individual does not repent whatsoever. He is proud of what he has done. And then where he's going to go to? Hell. For how long? For eternity. Now, if God is all-knowing, God knew beforehand, even before creating this individual, what choices this individual will make. And those choices will lead him to hell. And the question is, if God is all-knowing, why in the world have God created this individual to go to hell? Another tribute of God is that God is all-loving. If you are all-loving, why in the world would you create someone knowing that person would make the wrong choices in life and that those same choices would take that individual to hell? So the concept that we have one physical existence goes completely against the basic notions of what we think are the attributes of God: all-knowing, all-powerful. And then we have another tribute that is discussed by most religions, the attribute of all justice. If God is all justice, that means you treat people equally. There are those who defend the idea that when children die, they go to the limbo. And after the judgment day, they will get out from limbo and will go to heaven. And why? Well, they will go to heaven because they did not have the time to do anything wrong. And because they have no sins on their back, they will deserve heaven. Well, that begets the question. Why in the world didn't God kill us all when we are only 2 months old so we can all go to heaven? It doesn't sound just, does it? That, some children have the luck of dying early without experience any of the temptations of life, and they would deserve heaven for eternity. Meanwhile, we have to go through life and be tempted by all sorts of things, which eventually make us do mistakes to go to hell. That doesn't sound justice at all. Therefore, the idea that we have one single lifetime, it makes God look very evil, unjust. Now, with reincarnation, everything is different. With reincarnation, God is not evil. God knows everything. And we also have free will. We make any choice that we like. However, we will have to face the consequences of those choices. We are in control of our own destiny. By choosing right actions, we will benefit from the good consequences that these actions bring. But by choosing the wrong path, we will go through a process that we label as pain, as suffering, not to be punished, because a loving father, a loving creator does not punish his children. It provides always opportunities to make amends, opportunities to be educated, to grow. That's what suffering is. Suffering is nothing but an opportunity to learn and to move forward. I know it's not my topic because I'm supposed to talk about reincarnation, but I'm referring to God as if God is a he. But in the Spiritist philosophy, God is not a he or a she. God is a it, because as a matter of fact, God is the supreme intelligence of the universe, the cause of all things. It's not a human being per se. So these are the philosophical arguments in regards to reincarnation, which it reconciles with the idea that we have of God, that God is supreme good, supreme justice, and it's all knowing. Indeed, we are all destined to perfection. Now, how fast are we going to get there? It depends on each individual's effort to make themselves smarter, to make themselves more loving. And once again, that's our mission, to make a better version of ourselves. The next chapter, the next part to this chapter is actually asking a question about scientific arguments of reincarnation. Are there any? Are there any scientific arguments to actually base reincarnation? Well, science itself, it's a collective enterprise. You know, when you speak about different sciences, for example, astronomy. Astronomy is a collective enterprise made of many, many astronomers. I don't know if you guys remember this, but when I was a child, Pluto was considered the 9th planet. But the international astronomical community, they got into a meeting and they decided that Pluto is a dwarf planet. It's not in reality a real planet. So now we only have 8 planets. Now, did Pluto cease to exist? No, it's the definition of Pluto that changed. Now, do some astronomers believe that Pluto is a planet? Yes, but the science of astronomy consider Pluto to be a planet? No, it's a dwarf planet. The same thing happens with reincarnation. Science does not prove reincarnation. How can it prove? The current canons of science establishes that in order for you to have a scientific fact, one of the prerequisites is that it must be tested by many different scientists from different parts of the world, and they should arrive at the same conclusion, dealing with the concrete, the material part of the experiment. Now, reincarnation, although it happens also in the material body, it's a spiritual process. How could someone actually test if reincarnation is true? In that regard, in the scientific environment, it can't, because it cannot be repeatable by someone else. It cannot be tested by someone else at will. Now, there are scientists who believe in reincarnation because of their studies led them to conclude that reincarnation is a fact. For example, the Canadian American doctor Ian Stevenson. Ian Stevenson wrote a very interesting book called 20 Cases Suggestive of Reincarnation. And what Ian Stevenson did, he listened very carefully to spontaneous memory of children who happened to recall who they were and where they lived and who they were with in a previous existence. Some of these accounts happened far away from where the children currently lives. Like the family of the children never been where their child is actually saying they have lived before. So Ian Stevenson collected all this data and actually went to the places where children were saying they used to live in a previous existence to actually find out if the data matched someone else that lived in that area. And he went to speak with family of the individual that the children claims to be from a previous existence. He went to all these different places that one can check if someone has lived there or not, including the method of death. And surprisingly, the data matched. The children, they were not conjured this thing up. This was real data they were giving. Another book that he wrote, it's called Where Biology and Reincarnation Intersect. And in this book, he posits the idea that some of the birthmarks that people have, they are a reflection of how the individual have perished in a previous reincarnation. So in the book, there are pictures of individuals who said that in a previous existence, they were struck in their head, and now they have a particular scar in their forehead, or they were shot in their chest, and now they have birthmarks in their chest. There are all these different cases that it matches someone else's who lived in the past, but they're giving detailed description of who they have lived with. Then there are other books by other scientists called Life After Life. This is from Helen Wenbeck. She actually also traced people who had spontaneous memory of their previous reincarnation. And if you're listening to this for the first time, and if you read about reincarnation, the first thing that comes to mind is, how come we don't remember who we were in a previous existence? Well, you should know that forgetfulness, it's a very beneficial thing. The reason being, it's because one cannot imagine how destructive is the power of guilt. I work as a psychotherapist for many years. I've dealt with thousands of cases. And I also worked in a hospice. A hospice, it's a kind of service that is delivered for people who have terminal diagnosis. So when we actually meet them, science have established that they have less than 6 months to live. And it's interesting how after the individual dies, those who surround the individual go through these emotions, emotions of regret and emotions of guilt. And what is regret? Regret are things that we feel sorry because we didn't do. For example, I should have said, I love you more. And what is guilt? Guilt is the feeling that we experience because we have done something bad towards the individual who have died. And those who experience guilt, they wish they could forget what they have done. And in our past, in the past of our current existence, there are things that we wish we could forget. Because when we remember them, it's such a source of torment. We are completely perturbed by the things that we have done. Maybe we were in a rage of selfishness, of pride, of laziness, of resentfulness, and we sought vengeance, and we did something horrible to someone, or we said something horrible, and that would do everything to take that back. But now we have said it, or we have done it. And that memory, it's very destructive to our well-being. So when someone is in the spiritual plane and they recollect the things that they have done, it really hampers their growth. It causes a disturbance that it's very hard for them to move forward with their lives. Because one of the things that we have to do is to forgive ourselves, which has nothing to do with us agreeing with what we have done. To forgive ourselves, it means that we're going to give ourselves the chance to repair the mistake. And for that, we have the illusion of starting again, when in reality, when we reincarnate, we're not starting anything. We are the same spirit. We have one life, which is the spiritual life. But our physical existences are many. How many? As many times as needed in order for us to achieve perfection. So when we enter the flesh, we have the blessing of forgetfulness, which is very beneficial for us to grow. We meet with the people that we have harmed. We meet with people that we have loved, and we continue to grow. We help those who have helped us, and we make amends to those we have harmed. Ideally, of course, because in most instances, people have yet their selfishness and pride so strong guiding their behavior that they usually make the same mistakes, just the same way we do in school. But gradually, but constantly, we move forward and we become a better version of ourselves. So in this regard, there are individuals who are tormented by these memories. They did not forget what they have done in their past. And some of these memories actually leap over to this current physical existence, to this current reincarnation. And they seek therapy of past lives in order for them to have closure of whatever took place in their past existence, or something that is perturbing them in this current one. As a matter of fact, some of the memories, we might not have a clear picture of what they are, but they have a very strong disturbance in our behavior. There are individuals that suffer from claustrophobia, fear of closed places. And this could be a trauma that they bring from a past reincarnation. And by them understanding that this actually have occurred, but it's not currently occurring, they're able to free themselves from that fear. So this is some of the scientific studies that one can do in order to arrive that reincarnation is a possibility. And there are many scientists who are engaged in this kind of study. But science as a collective enterprise does not believe in reincarnation, because the current canons of science does not make it possible for the material study of reincarnation. Now, what are some religious arguments for reincarnation? Well, many religions discuss reincarnation. On Hinduism, for example, there is the concept of the wheel of samsara, which is the multiple rebirths that we have. The Prince Arjuna talked about reincarnation. You have the Book of the Dead that talks about reincarnation. We have the Old Testament and the New Testament that talks about reincarnation. Obviously, you will not find the word reincarnation in these ancient texts. Reason being, it's because the word reincarnation is a modern word, which means the action of returning to the flesh. But the concept, the idea that we are immortal and that we come back here as many times as we need, we definitely find that in all these different sacred texts, including the Bible itself. Jesus, for example, spoke about reincarnation. There is a famous passage that the lawmaker Nicodemus, a Pharisee, meets with him to have a discussion with him. And he actually asks Jesus, how is it possible that a grown-up man can actually enter in a woman's womb in order to be reborn? Because Jesus tells him that no one will see the kingdom of heaven unless he is reborn again. And Nicodemus thought that a grown-up individual needed to enter a woman's womb. And Jesus explains to him of what is the flesh is of the flesh and what is from the spirit and the spirit. So the whole passage, I'm not going to bore you with the whole passage, but basically Jesus tells us that we're born out of water. And the religions, traditions have used this passage to say that to be born again is to be baptized. So you have different sects of Christianity that baptizes the individual with water. But interesting enough, when we study our body's composition, a grown-up body is 68% of water. A man's sperm is a drop of water. A woman's egg is a drop of water. When the sperm meets the egg and that becomes a zygote, that is a little ball of water. So to be born out of water is to acquire a new body. And then there is another passage in which the disciples are asking Jesus, how come that the scripture says that Elijah should be back, should be back again? And Christ tells them that Elijah has come back, but they have not recognized him. And he was referring to John the Baptist, the one that was beheaded. John the Baptist was the forerunner of Christ's message, and they did not recognize John the Baptist. They did not recognize Elijah. So this is another passage in which Jesus talks about reincarnation. And one of the most famous Jesus teaching is that each one according to their deeds. In other words, our future is on our hands. We are the architects of our own destiny. We choose what we want to do with our lives. And therefore, we find ourselves at the right place, at the right time, with the right people. Some people might ask, but what about heredity? Aren't we victims of our genetic material? Actually not. In the process of reincarnation, the spirit will attract the organic matter that is in accordance with his or her spiritual needs. So science explains that that's a process that occurs naturally. And when someone is actually born with a birth defect, that's just, unfortunately, product of bad chance, bad luck. And when someone is actually born with smarts, they are intellectually above average. Once again, that's just pure luck. They have inherited the right genes, which is a concept, if you are a believer in God, that will be completely unjust, that people can actually have better genes or bad genes just because of pure luck or the lack of. In reality, the spirit will attract through a process of magnetism the organic matter that he or she needs in order to fulfill its mission, which is to better themselves. Therefore, there is no victims. We are all responsible for our destiny. We are constantly constructing tomorrow by what we're doing today. And today is the result of what we have done yesterday. Therefore, we are in control and no one else. So when things seems to be very difficult and you have a hard time understanding those around you and living with those around you, take a moment to think that there is a chance you begged for these individuals to be next to you, to be your relatives, to be part of your life. And before you think that what they have done against you, that you feel this way, first ask yourself what you have done for them to feel this way about you. That way, you're not placing the responsibility of making amends onto someone else's hand. Do your part. And if that person does not want to make amends, now that's their problem. They will carry the toxic material of resentfulness, of grudge, of hatred. But you will set yourself free by forgiving that person and moving forward with your life. So in conclusion, there are philosophical, scientific, and religious arguments to back up reincarnation. Philosophically speaking, only reincarnation reconciles what we see in life and the attributes of God. Scientifically, as a collective enterprise, science cannot yet establish that reincarnation is a fact, but there are plenty of scientists who study the process of reincarnation, like Dr. Ian Stevenson and Dr. Banerjee from India, that gives evidence of the possibility of reincarnation. And religiously, we have heard of reincarnation through many religious texts, including Christ himself speaking about it. And what it's fascinating about this topic is the fact that we are not victims, we are responsible for our destiny. So at this point, I conclude my short talk, and let's see if there are any questions. It says here, would you please explain again the process of heredity in reincarnation? There are many books written on this topic in the Spiritist literature. There is a series of books called the André Louis series. André Louis was a physician while in the flesh. And after his body died and he found himself in the spiritual plane, he began studying all of these different topics, including reincarnation, through the lenses of a physician. So he brings many scientific concepts. And there is a book, it's the third in the series, called The Messenger. I'm sorry, it's the second in the series, called The Messenger. And in this book, he gives detailed accounts of how reincarnation process is handled in the spiritual plane. There are actual engineers that handle the process of reincarnation, and that it shows with great details how our genetic material is actually selected by a group of individuals who are responsible for this person's future incarnation. But for the majority of the people, it's actually an automatic process. The spirit itself has energy, and that energy, just like any energetic material, either repels or attracts. So in the process of reincarnation, that's the spirit who is reincarnating will attract the genetic material that is needed. You know, in a single man's ejaculation, there are from 100 million to 500 million sperms. Just imagine the amount of different possibilities that it has with the single process of reincarnation. There are many chances of this individual either to inherit a great intellect or to inherit a brain, to inherit genetic material that would have as a consequence intellectual limitations for this individual. But the spirit would actually make the sperm that's carrying the genetic material, it would actually make that sperm swim faster in order to achieve the egg. And as you know, it's so beautiful that once the sperm enters the egg now creates a shield in order to avoid future semens to actually enter the same egg, and the process begins. And the process of reincarnation begins even before that moment, because the parents have to accept the future spirit that will be reincarnating through them. And once they accepted, and then the process of multiplication of the cells begin, the zygote becomes a blastocyst and so forth, the spirit is connected to that group of cells. This brings to another sensitive subject, and it's very worthy of speaking as of now, because there are so many laws that are facilitating the process of abortion. But in the Spiritist philosophy, the spirit is connected to its future body in the moment of conception. Therefore, it's not recommended abortion at any stage of pregnancy. Let me read here the second question. One moment, please. Can you explain How can someone reincarnate in different worlds? The current astronomy statistics state that in our galaxy alone, there are approximately 100 billion stars. We're not talking about planets, stars, 100 billion of them. And we know by our own star called the sun, we have 8 planets. So if you take our own sun as a starting point, one might calculate that there are approximately 800 billion planets in our galaxy alone. And there are calculations to try to find out how many galaxies there are in the universe. And the number varies so much because there are so many different studies on this topic, and the universe is infinite. But the last time I checked, it's about 300 billion galaxies. To the extent that the astronomers say that there are more stars in the heaven than all the grain of sands from all the beaches on the planet combined. Can you even think of what that number is? It's just an amazing number. So what do all these planets serve for? What's the point of all these stars? Is it just for our contemplation at night so we can stare at them? Obviously not. So these different planets, according to the Spiritist philosophy, they serve as different schools for the ascendancy of the soul. Our first reincarnations begin in more crude, rudimentary planets. And as we keep evolving, we keep changing the school. When planet Earth presents all the conditions that we need to move forward, after we learned all these lessons, then we move forward to a highly evolved planet, and so forth. So there are planets that we cannot even think about. What is the people's lifestyle on this planet, what they do for a living, how their society are structured, because it's a different evolution according to our own level that we find ourselves. But basically, that's it. Planets are different schools for the ascendancy of the soul. But we should not think that in order for us to achieve perfection, we must inhabit all these planets. Not at all. Just because there are kindergartens that serve the same purpose as other kindergartens. A child to graduate a kindergarten does not have to attend all kindergartens in the city, just one of them. And the same is for us. We only have to attend one planet. If that planet serves us well for that level that we find ourselves in, then we go to a different level. When Allan Kardec, the codifier of the Spiritist philosophy, began writing on these subjects, there are great accounts of the planet Mars and Jupiter in the Revue Spiritiste, which is the magazine that he published back in the 1858. A great reading I recommend to everyone. And now there's a last question here. Can you explain the process of evolution? Well, this topic here, it requires a whole lecture in itself. The spirit is always ascending, and it uses different bodies according to its intellectual and moral needs. We Spiritists, we believe in evolution, that simple organisms will develop into more complex organisms. But evolution does not happen only in the physical realm. It also happens for the spirit. So the spirit is inhabiting different bodies in order to continue its evolution, the same spirit. But when we find ourselves in the animal kingdom, it's not necessarily a spirit. It's something that will evolve to become a spirit. We call it an intelligent principle. So animals, they don't have spirits. Animals have intelligent principles. And the intelligent principle in these animals, through many, many thousands of years, will acquire the knowledge that they need in order to keep ascending to different levels. So the body of these animals die, but the intelligent principle in those bodies have acquired experience and knowledge in order to inhabit a more complex body. And in biology, there is this great mystery of how evolution begins, because no one knows how life began here on the planet. And there are so many debates on this topic because, yes, the collective enterprise of science believes in the evolution, but the amount of fossil record that actually shows the transition of one species to the next, it's almost none. You know, when do an animal cease to be this species and then becomes another species? The fossil record has almost nothing of this. And if evolution is true, as according to the great Charles Darwin, who published the book 1858, The Origin of the Species, we should see a gradual change in these organisms. But Charles Darwin himself was puzzled by this because there is a period in history called the Precambrian explosion, which occurred approximately 540 million years, in which all these new body parts, all these different species suddenly appeared in the fossil record. You know, where were the transitions in order that accumulated to achieve to these body parts to these new species? There are no transitions. So the fossil record lacks these transitions. And why is that? Well, Andrea Luiz, in a book called Evolution in Two Worlds, he explains that the transition actually happens in the spiritual plane. Beyond this physical body, we are a spirit, and between the spirit and the body, we have a perispirit, something that connects the body to the spirit and the spirit to the body. And this perispirit is moldable. So the spiritual engineers, they change the perispirit. And when the organism is about to reincarnate, the cells that will receive from both of its parents will be molded in the perispirit. And if the perispirit is changed, he or she will also mold the body according to its new transformed perispirit. So the changing of species happens in the spiritual plane. Obviously, from a scientific point of view, how can we prove this? We're not in the spiritual plane. This is actually material for the future, for all of us to study. But nonetheless, this is the Spiritist view of evolution. Thank you, all of you, very much for joining us on this morning. Be in peace.